This meeting is now adjourned. I now invite the COP to adopt the decision entitled Glasgow Climate Pact. India wishes to take the floor. India, you have the floor.
Mr. President, the next text we propose and will be read as follows. If you permit me, I read that. Okay. Now I propose call upon parties to accelerate the development, deployment, and dissemination of technologies and adoption of policies to transition towards low-emission energy systems, including by rapidly scaling up deployment of clean power generation and energy efficiency measures, including accelerating effort to phase down unabated coal power and phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies while providing targeted support to the poorest and the most vulnerable in line with national circumstances and recognizing the need for support towards a just transition.
Could I ask whether distinguished delegates, having heard the proposal, is this proposal agreeable to you? I have two interventions. I have an intervention from Switzerland. Switzerland, I give you the floor.
I would like to express our profound disappointment that the language that we have agreed on coal and fossil fuel subsidies has been further watered down as a result of an intransparent process. Let us be clear, we do not need to phase down, but to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies.
We all know that European wealth was built on coal, and if we don't get rid of coal, European death will also be built on coal. We know full well that coal has no future. And this is what we're working on with our own plans to put an end to coal in Europe in the foreseeable future.
Small countries were not equally represented in the bilateral consultations with the COP presidency, and we believe weakening the language regarding the phase-out of fossil fuels, especially coal, is nor ambitious nor in line with reaching the 1.5 degrees temperature goal. For the greater good, we must swallow this bitter pill. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. President.
We believe we have been sidelined in a non-transparent and non-inclusive process. At the stocktake, we already compromised to what we perceived was an agreement by parties, even if we were unhappy with the text. But now we learn that there are even further changes that we were not being made aware. We all have remaining concerns, but we're told we could not reopen the text. Mexico, for example, believes the language on human rights should have been strengthened and are very, very disappointed that such demands were not heard, while others can still ask to water down our promises. Thank you.
On behalf of the Marshall Islands, I wish to read into the record our profound disappointment with the change in the language on coal from phase out to phase down. I ask that this be reflected in the report of this meeting. This commitment on coal had been a bright spot in this package. It was one of the things we were hoping to carry out of here and back home with pride, and it hurts deeply to see that bright spot dim. We accept this change with the greatest reluctance. We do so only, and I really want to stress, only, because there are critical elements of this package that people in my country need as a lifeline for their future. Thank you.
What we'd like to express, of course, is not just our astonishment, but our immense disappointment in the manner in which this has been introduced. And secondly, that we seem to be dealing with these various clauses in a disjointed fashion. There's no confluence between the earlier clauses prior to this that talks about the 1.5 degree, and indeed the impact on our ability to reach 1.5 degree by having a now what we call a phase down, which in fact has no demonstrable measurements, no methodology as to how we will measure this phase down. And I think that is critically important, and we need to remember that. And I hope all the other countries that have the capacity and the ability to be able to do so will in fact do so. Because small island states like ours do not have the capacity, we're reliant on all the other good countries that believe in phasing out coal will do that for us. Thank you.
May I just say to all delegates, I apologize for the way this process has unfolded, and I'm deeply sorry. I also understand the deep disappointment. But I think, as you have noted, it's also vital that we protect this package. So, given what interventions we've had, I propose that the revised proposal is adopted as orally amended. A revised version, a written version, will be issued shortly. Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
We will be leaving Glasgow with clarity on the work we need to undertake to reach the 1.5 degree goal. Regarding finance, an issue extensively discussed here at COP26, all parties agree that much more support needs to be provided to developing countries. Yes, we are disappointed that the 100 billion pledge remains outstanding, and I call upon all donors to please make it a reality as by next year. And we all know that this is not only about the 100 billion. Initiating the process for the definition of the new global goal on finance as soon as possible is therefore critical. We came into COP26 knowing we had a significant emissions gap, and to address it, parties have collectively agreed to look for ways to increase actions continuously with the overall objective of closing that gap. There can be no doubting the urgency of this task. This is a question of the long-term survival of humanity on this planet. COP26 also sees the finalization of guidelines for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. This is a significant accomplishment. After 6 years of intense negotiations, we have reached a compromise on the pending issue of Article 6. Operationalizing Article 6 will allow parties to scale up their cooperation, mobilize additional finance and private sector engagement, and ensure that the rules are the same for everyone. We also finalized the negotiations on the enhanced transparency framework. This will allow all parties to continue building trust. Once again, thank all of you for making COP26 a success and for working so hard. Let us enjoy what we have accomplished, but let us also prepare for the next chapter of our journey together with Egypt in beautiful Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Friends, it is up to all of us to sustain our lodestar of keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. At the start of this summit, the world was asking, quite rightly, do the parties assembled here in Glasgow have the courage to rise to the scale of the challenge? Well, my friends, you have responded. We have responded. History has been made here in Glasgow. And what we now need to ensure that the next chapter charts the success of the commitments that we have solemnly made together in the Glasgow Climate Pact. Thank you. Friends, we still have some of the agenda to go. You can't go for dinner yet. I now open the floor to hear statements from groups and parties. I request COP Rapporteur Ahmed Rajabi to assume the chair.
Now I invite Bhutan deliver a statement on behalf of LDC. You have the floor.
During the last 2 weeks, we have heard acknowledgements that the climate crisis is here again and again. The LDC knows this firsthand. Everyone in this room understands the emergency, but this understanding is not reflected in our collective action. Though we know emissions must halve by 2030, they continue to increase. Climate finance must increase to support vulnerable countries and their people to adapt as best as possible and address the unavoidable loss and damage, yet promises have not been met.
Panama, you have the floor.
Mr. President, it is no secret that Panama is not fully happy with the approved package. More specifically, we're not happy with the rules for Article 6. In our view, the decisions on markets were clearly drafted by the largest emitters for their own benefit, for the benefit of their corporate sectors, accreditation companies, and large NGOs. The rules on Article 6 are not as robust as science demands. They do not directly consider the needs and contributions of rainforest nations like mine. Mr. President, our red lines on this issue were not only crossed, they were stumped. Therefore, Panama is reluctant to call the outcome of this conference a full success. However, the overall package is a step forward. Not a perfect step, but a step in the right direction nonetheless. Mr. President, the weakening of the text regarding coal and fossil fuels is a clear failure for humanity, a failure to science, a failure to current and to the future generations. We had the opportunity here in Glasgow to pave the way to keep fossil fuels in the ground, but the approved package fails to keep them in the ground. Shame on us. It is evident that once again, the most vulnerable countries and least responsible for this crisis have assumed the biggest sacrifices to ensure compromises. This must outrage everyone. Additionally, Panama would like to reiterate its indignation for the exclusion of a call on the importance of international collaboration to assess and overcome the impacts of the climate crisis on global health. We hope in the next COP we will deliver on this very important issue. Having that said, Mr. President, and based on the high level of ambition in mitigation and adaptation provisions of the general package, and to remind the world that the multilateral system is a must to solve the crisis, Panama accepted the Glasgow package. Lastly, I want to make a call to the youth of the world. The most effective way to ensure 1.5 is kept alive and that countries actually fulfill the promises of the Glasgow package is for you to get involved. Therefore, I urge you to get involved in diplomacy. I urge you to get involved in politics. I urge you to get involved in climate action. We need more of you in these tables for this process and other processes to deliver the outcomes that will ensure a livable planet for current and future generations. Do not give up. Keep pushing. Keep fighting. We can do it. Once again, Mr. President, thank you very much, and good night, everybody.
Thank you for your statement. Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Japan. Kenya, you have the floor.
Mr. President, as I said yesterday, for Africa, 1.5 is 3+ degrees centigrade. And this is not a statistic. It is a matter of life and death for our people and for our continent, who contribute the least in terms of emissions, yet bear the brunt of the devastating effects of global warming. We came to seek support humbly for the special needs and circumstances of Africa, and begged, as we have begged in COP22, COP23, COP24, COP25, for us to be given an opportunity to be heard, to make our case. And just like it happened in previous COPs, our plea was rejected. We are disappointed, to say the least. And we hope and pray that COP27 that will be in Africa, Egypt, this matter so important will be given due consideration. And we are not saying at all that Africa is special. We are saying Africa has special needs and circumstances. And that doesn't mean that no other region has special needs and circumstances. Mr. President, during the World Leaders Summit, our leaders from every region of the world delivered very strong statements, which made us believe this will be a different COP. And I'll just summarize a few, actually quote a few memorable quotes. One leader said this, quote, "Where Paris promised, Glasgow delivers." Another said, "The long wait is over." Another said, "Now is the day, now is the hour." And yet another said, "We must make COP26 a resounding success." So very reassuring, so very comforting statements made by our leaders. Sadly, these statements, very powerful statements, did not seem at all to have trickled to our technical negotiators, nor in fact to the ministerial negotiators. This statement sat at odd from what we witnessed at both the technical negotiations and at the ministerial negotiations. Mr. President, while Glasgow did not deliver what Paris promised, while the long wait is not over and may not be over for some while, and while COP26 may not have been the resounding success that it was built for, nevertheless, the Glasgow package represents a positive step in the fulfillment of the Paris promise. Mr. President, while we welcome the pledges and commitments made by the developed countries during this conference, as regards provision of adequate and predictable funding to the developing countries, trust is of utmost importance. Mr. President, as the saying goes, in quote, "Once bitten, twice shy." In respect of the failed delivery of the US $100 billion per year, developing countries have been beaten not once, not twice, not thrice, but more than 10 times, representing the more than 10 years that this promise has not been delivered. In this case, trust has not only been broken, it has been shattered. And a lot needs to be done, not by mere words and empty promises, as we have witnessed here, but by action if this trust, so important, is to be restored. For this reason, as we leave Glasgow to go back home, we ask ourselves if, whether, when, and on what terms and conditions would the new pledges and commitments that we so much welcome will be delivered by the developed countries. How many, we ask ourselves, how many more of our people would have to die, to starve? How many of their livelihood to be destroyed before these pledges are delivered, if they will be delivered at all? Mr. President, we also ask ourselves why the same countries that have made these wonderful new pledges are the same countries that at technical, at ministerial, they are so opposed to Article 6.2, which provides or would have provided a dedicated financing scheme for adaptation. Why the same countries would be opposed to the establishment of financing facility for loss and damage. Those are really questions that we must ask and are asking ourselves whether what we're hearing today will become another game of musical chairs as the $100 billion pledge. Mr. President, but while we may not have achieved all, we believe the balance reached will move the process forward. For this reason, Mr. President, and on the spirit of compromise, Kenya endorses the Glasgow Climate Package. We hope this positive step will mature into real and concrete results as we go into the African COP27. I thank you, Mr. President.
Dominican Republic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I arrived in Glasgow on October 25th with a group of young, optimistic negotiators with very high expectations. Starting work at the preparatory meetings was the only way to secure a successful and well-represented conference of the parties for the Dominican Republic. As we witnessed prior to coming to Glasgow and during this COP, all eyes are on us. The whole world is watching and waiting impatiently for some answers, especially back home. Dominican Republic's priorities were clear: keeping 1.5 within reach, more finance, especially for adaptation, loss and damage, and closing the Paris rulebook. Tonight, we are handing out to them what is the result of 2 weeks of negotiations, political will, and the enormous effort of almost 200 nations. We congratulate all the parties and the UK presidency for reaching a balanced outcome today. Although this is far from a perfect text, we have taken important steps forward in our efforts to keep 1.5 alive and deliver the much-needed outcomes on adaptation. We congratulate you as well, Mr. President, and thank you for your efforts in reaching consensus. We acknowledge that it was not an easy task. In terms of loss and damage, the Santiago Network has finally been given its mandate and functions. The many hours and hard work spent to achieve this were not in vain. However, efforts to achieve other vital outcomes were. Over the course of this COP, the Alliance of Small Island States developed a historic proposal for loss and damage that went on to win the support of the representatives of 6 billion of the world's people. Establishing the Glasgow Loss and Damage Facility at COP26 would have been historic, a clear signal to the outside world that we heard the cries of the most vulnerable and we are in solidarity with their plight. However, this was a red line for a handful of developed countries. And instead, what we got was a dialogue. How is this climate justice? Small islands were asked once again to concede and compromise with the objective of reaching consensus. But as my colleague from Antigua and Barbuda said yesterday, These are not just words that we're considering, it is our future. We don't need a dialogue to tell us that finance is needed to help address loss and damage. We don't need a dialogue to tell us that we will and are experiencing climate impacts beyond our adaptive capacity through no fault of our own, and we'll continue to do so at 1.5 degrees. We don't need a dialogue because this is established scientific fact. But again, a dialogue is what we got, and we will make the best of it. Because it is just a dialogue, but it represents the long nights that we work to try to address the spectrum of issues around loss and damage. And because this dialogue, for us, will be substantive. We interpret it to be the work to bring us closer to a finance facility, and we expect the result of this dialogue to be a comprehensive work program with specific recommendations for parties. On Article 6, our priorities were also clear. The only way to respect environmental integrity was recognizing the efforts of the most vulnerable. With REDD+ recognition, we were not asking for hands out, but recognition on the work done to keep climate stability. In the spirit of building within this international community and the purpose of what brings us together, we endorsed this decision, but we will keep fighting. And I can't help but wonder, will my team of young, and I hope still optimistic negotiators, feel proud now that our high expectations were not met? I hope and am optimistic that this is the case, because this step forward cannot blind us from the urgency signaled by science and by the numerous lives and livelihoods we keep losing in small island developing states, least developed countries, and elsewhere. I thank you.
I would like to give the floor to the representative speaking on behalf of environmental non-governmental organizations.
Asad Raymond, Warren Want, speaking on behalf of the Climate Justice constituency. I'm finding it difficult to convey our anger and frustration at this utter betrayal of people. Hollow words about climate emergency from the richest countries, an utter disregard of the science and equity, false ambition and disdain for justice, a license to pollute with net zero 2050 and carbon markets. You have made decisions, as one party acknowledged, decisions about life and death for millions. Yet 500 years of colonial rule and white supremacy, looting the wealth of the global south, and you still value your profits over the lives of black, brown and indigenous people. The rich have refused to do their fair share. More empty words on climate finance. You've turned your backs on the poorest who face a crisis of COVID, economic and climate apartheid because of the actions of the richest. It's immoral for the rich to talk about their future children and grandchildren when the children of the global south are dying now. We needed concrete solidarity and cooperation. The rich offered more empty words. You're not keeping 1.5 alive. You're setting us on a pathway to 2.5 degrees. You're setting the planet on fire and claiming to act. Your greenwashing kills, and no amount of spinning will mask that. But we are not without hope. It just will not rest with you, but with us, and we don't compromise on justice.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of farmers' non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jakir of Goila, Bangladesh, and I am speaking on behalf of the farmers' constituency. As farmers working closely with nature, we are at the forefront of climate change impacts. We are aware of the need to act now to keep 1.5 degree alive. If not, our businesses, communities, families, and livelihoods will be lost, and food security will severely regress across the world. That is why, as farmers, we are committed to play our part in meeting the climate challenge. We are already contributing to global efforts, but we can do more. Because we are part of the solution, farmers have a key role in adaptation and mitigation. Mr. President, what we need is a clear and enabling, inclusive and farmer-led policy framework, coupled with significant investment in order to deliver sustainable solutions for our food systems and economies, and which protect human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples. We reaffirm the importance of having a specific program on agriculture, and we now need action. We want to see the outcomes of Coronavia translated into national plans for the implementation of the Paris Agreement on the ground. Dear Mr. President, as farmers, we are ready to play a central part in the path towards COP27 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of indigenous peoples' organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Insinali Dumaay. Thank you, Chair. My name is Helen Magata. I am from the Kadaklan Indigenous People and speaking on behalf of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. In my culture, we gather around fire, women, men, children, and elders. We call this our dapay. Our dapay brings our community together to celebrate victory, to learn from each other, and to resolve community disputes. Today, global relationships are broken, and we are gathered here to repair them together. In our dapay, we give thanks and acknowledge the historic first annual Indigenous Knowledge Holders Gathering with representation from our 7 socio-cultural regions. This marks an institutional shift towards meaningful engagement with Indigenous people's knowledge, which continues with COP's adoption of the LCIPP decision. We appreciate the commitment of the $1.7 billion for Indigenous-led solutions for forest and lands protection, and look forward to designing our own inclusive mechanism benefiting all 7 socio-cultural regions. Our positive relationship with the UK presidency resulted in Indigenous Pavilion and our dialogue with the presidency. We welcome the inclusion of the rights of Indigenous peoples in some provisions of the Article 6. However, we wanted to see an independent grievance mechanism, not a process in Article 6.4. We are also dismayed at the exclusion of our rights in activity design and implementation. In particular, the consultation provisions in 6.4 is inadequate. It needs to include applicable international standards and ensure compliance with the rights of Indigenous peoples to free, prior, and informed consent. We appreciate the inclusion of 3 seats for Indigenous peoples, women and gender, and the Yongo in the CTCN board, and welcome the conclusions of the Gender and Climate Change Agenda. The rights of Indigenous women must be respected in climate finance and in all climate actions. Our contributions are rooted in our knowledge gained from close material and spiritual connection with our natural surroundings, from our lands, territories, and natural resources. Indigenous people's ability to offer solutions depends on respect of our rights. Every loss of our rights hinders our ability to maintain and strengthen our invaluable knowledge. Thank you for the SABSTA and SBI chairs, COP26 Presidency, and Climate Champions. We look forward to continuing our work with the COP26 Presidency, and we welcome new collaboration with the COP27 Presidency to facilitate the implementation of Indigenous-led solutions. Insinali Dumaay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of local governments and municipal authorities. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished participants, the local government and the municipal authorities constituency to UNFCCC welcomes the outcomes of this COP, particularly new references to multi-level and cooperative action, local and regional governments and constituencies, as well as the Glasgow Climate Pact. LGMA is ready to support implementation in order to accelerate ambitious action to respond to climate emergency and deliver Paris Agreement. However, we are disappointed and concerned on the fact that this COP26 did not result in a meaningful outcome on loss and damage. The COP27 shall take place in Africa, the youngest and most urbanizing continent. That COP should consider the aspects of demographic dividend, sustainable urbanization and adaptation to focus on the role of cities in climate change and how they can finance their green plans. Rwanda has promoted investments in green economies, green infrastructure, and green local government plans with equitable sharing of the available meager resources for climate finance. The elaboration of submitted nationally determined contributions has been participatory, and that process allows us to localize them along with the SDGs. Discussions here at COP26 showed that the LGMA in Africa and the Global South are committed and they can do. However, there is a need for partnership and investments from the Global North because climate change is a shared responsibility. I thank you for kind attention.
Thank you for your statement. Now, I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of research and independent non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the research and independent NGOs. My name is Daniel Dominguez. I'm a Marshall Scholar at the University of Glasgow and a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow at Colorado State University. One of the great strengths of the research community is that we are engaged in partnerships with policy and decision makers and stand at the ready to do more to advance on the urgent challenges we have heard about from the IPCC and again here in Glasgow. We commend the explicit recognition of the importance of science in decision making in the cover decision and stand ready to respond to the call for researchers. We can bring together researchers from the natural and social sciences, the arts and humanities, and enrich our research with traditional knowledge, local communities, and youth perspectives for robust engagement and action. And as you know, action, and in particular, evidence-based action, is what is needed most right now. With the coronavirus pandemic, we have seen what can be accomplished when governments, community leaders, civil society representatives, the scientific community, and citizens work together to meet a common goal. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the research community continues to conduct research, educate, and train young scientists. And in doing so, we have become more resilient to the changing dynamics of the global stage. We also have adapted and responded to knowledge needs in real time. As a result, we are using our higher capability to conduct active climate change research across disciplines and to help bridge the gap between awareness and action. We encourage governmental organizations to continue to support collaboration between researchers in different nations and disciplines. It is vital to continue to build the capacity of the next generation of scientists, the academic capabilities of least developed countries, and non-traditional educational programs that allow them to engage in climate change research and solutions. As a young scientist supported by 2 government institutions, I can attest that when you invite us to collaborate across national lines and in these programs, the research community can better meet the needs of all concerned. The world has recognized climate change science. It is time to innovate, adapt, and create solutions to human health, social justice, the economy, governance, and the natural and life science impacts of climate change. In closing, the research and independent non-governmental organizations emphasize and reiterate our commitment in partnering with you to support you as you address these challenges and to accelerate solutions. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of trade unions, non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
President, Excellencies, delegates and observers. I'm Richard Hardy, National Secretary for the Trade Union Prospect in Scotland, a member of the General Council of the Scottish Trade Union Congress, and I was a member of the Scottish Government's groundbreaking Just Transition Commission. I'm speaking today on behalf of 210 million workers in 165 countries represented by the global trade union movement. Mr. President, no country has ever had so much time to prepare for a COP. Never have the challenges been clearer than in this year. Never have the calls for action from scientists, young people, indigenous communities, women, citizens, activists, and the affected and threatened workers in all the corners of the world been louder. And yet, as the voice of the workers, we are truly puzzled. To whom have you been listening in the run-up to this COP? How has the outcome on ambition, finance, responsibility, and inclusion fallen so short? We believe that this deal will allow countries and companies to trade away our hope for a safe future. The loopholes in the Article 6 mechanisms will undermine the deep and fast decarbonisation that we all need. Developing countries are going home without guarantees for the money that is owed them. There are no concrete mechanisms to catch up for the previous promises of $100 billion a year, only talks about a long-term finance goal, only limited progress on adaptation, and above all, no loss and damage finance instrument. This is plainly shameful on the part of those, especially the EU and the US, who have argued against progress on this urgently needed support. Yes, the global trade union movement is happy that just transition has finally found its way into the language used by many parties and observers. We saw and we appreciate the adoption by donor countries of the Declaration on supporting the conditions for a just transition internationally, and we applaud the strong commitments made by signatories. We urge the parties to continue to work towards a just transition, one that is about jobs, plans and investment. Once again, we call on parties to step up their NDCs and create the millions of good quality jobs and good work with your climate policies and measures which the world desperately requires. In closing, I would ask everyone to remember for all future discussion that labour rights are human rights. Unions need a voice at the table in social dialogue processes that deliver on just transition, on jobs and on investment. This is how we will deliver the climate ambition that is needed. We hoped for greater ambition here in Glasgow, and as we move forward, the global trade union movement demands that we set our sights much, much higher. People power, climate justice.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of women and gender non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mwana Hamisi Singano, an African feminist and a passionate advocate of just, equal, fair, and sustainable world. I speak on behalf of the Women and Gender constituency, but specifically, I'm making this statement for the ones alive who are not here and for the ones who have been murdered protecting our land. Throughout the existence of UNFCCC, governments have moved from policies to empty pledges, to press releases and proclamations made outside the negotiation process. That means they cannot be held to account for failing to meet them. Net zero pledges without concrete plan to achieve real zero emissions and without adequate legal binding commitment to protect human rights are simply greenwashing, a smokescreen hiding the intent to continue polluting and digging the graves of our present and future generation with impunity. We are tired of waiting for the government to prioritize people and the planet over the profit while so many lives are being impacted and lost. We are out of the time and we are out of the patience. As feminists, African feminists to be specific, indigenous people, grassroots women and leaders, we have been at the center of resistance throughout history. We came to this COP year in, here out with a solution that are sustainable, solution that center food sovereignty, and solution which embody understanding of our mutual relationship to the land and ecosystem. And year in, year out, you prioritize large corporations and businesses as usual approaches that mount to nothing but hot air. Chair, our movement for climate justice are louder, bolder, and more powerful than ever. I will promise you, you will hear from us at home, in our communities, and in the policy spaces as we shift policy. And we have learned from this COP not to wait to be invited, to be involved, or to be engaged. In Egypt, we'll show up, we'll claim our urgency, and we'll own the process. As African women, allow me to welcome you to Egypt. As you plan your travel to COP27, kindly be reminded hypocrisy, forced solution, rhetorics, and inaction are strictly prohibited. People power, climate justice.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of children and young non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
I'm Adèle from France. I'm Mark from Hong Kong, and we speak on behalf of YOUNGO, the official children and youth constituency. We would like to thank Italy and other parties that have supported the meaningful inclusion of young people. We are the children and grandchildren you spoke of earlier today. We thank Patricia for being here, but it is unacceptable that most of you have already left the room for dinner and other pleasantries by the time constituencies get the opportunity to speak. We are half of the people that are in the room right now. Stop talking on behalf of us and let us speak for ourselves. Additionally, there has never been a decision focused on the needs and priorities of children and young people. This must be rectified. Next year is the 30th anniversary of the signing of the UNFCCC, and hopefully we will see this addressed by you before COP27. Finally, for the first time in UNFCCC's history, we are having a real seat at a constituted body, the advisory board of the CTCN, together with our sister constituencies, WGC and IPO. And we request for the other constituted bodies to follow. Finally, you concluded, but what kind of decisions have you adopted today? This COP was supposed to be about the future of our planet and us the people, of loss and damage, and of human rights. It was claimed to be the most inclusive COP ever, but last-minute, intransparent amendments drastically weakened the path to phase out fossil fuel. This does not keep 1.5 alive. 1.5 is dying, and so are people and your children. After all these years, we continue to urge parties to meet $100 billion promise, not in 2023, but today, and to allocate at least 50% to adaptation and to develop loss and damage finance. This is how you could keep 1.5 alive. We dream of a future when we do not need to fight for our food, our culture, water. You are denying us this basic right to life and are letting greenwashing, cynicism, and politics corrupt these decisions. As half the population of the world, we are half the population of the world. We will continue to fight for climate justice, gender equality, human rights, youth inclusions, that many of you ignored. As global youth, we will take back our right to a safe and healthy environment. We are the generation
that takes action and does not wait for COPs to enable change. Everywhere we are in the world, in our local communities, for our lives, our futures, for the sake of our life on Earth, we will hold you accountable. We are taking the lead and what is best for our humanity. And if you don't have the capacity to take the lead yourselves, then do what's right. Follow us. People power, climate justice.
Thank you for your statement. I would like to give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of business and industry non-governmental organizations. You have 2 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sandra Hani from the International Chamber of Commerce, and it is my honor to address you on behalf of the business and industry constituency at this meeting. We commend the UK presidency for their leadership, dedication, and intensive work to get us to an agreement. We sincerely thank the presidency and UNFCCC Secretariat for their efforts to stage this conference under difficult public health conditions and to bring it to a successful conclusion. We also thank the UNFCCC Executive Secretary for her remarks on the role that business and other observers have in providing solutions. Business has strongly supported an ambitious outcome at COP26. We have demonstrated our commitment by driving investment, innovation, and action needed, and advancing adaptation and resilience. We are pleased to see this successful step forward, but much work needs to be done, both to limit temperature rise to 1.5 and to finalize the work programs on Article 6. On Article 6, markets have the potential to drive emissions reduction at scale with efficiency, high environmental integrity, and no double counting. We urge UNFCCC parties to commit to continued discussions, engaging the private sector to build confidence in how the Article 6 rules will function in the real economy. Business and industry stands ready to assist in the important further technical work. On finance, we recognize that private and public sector investment will be essential to achieve our shared ambitions. For our part, business and industry stands ready to invest and unlock opportunities. On keeping 1.5 alive, we have seen increased ambition from many parties, but the job is not yet done. Staying within 1.5 and achieving a net zero future by 2050 requires governments to level up and present clear 2030 and 2050 targets and increasingly ambitious NDCs. Business and industry will play our part. We have a key role and responsibility both to push for collective action at COP and at home. Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Glasgow has been a major milestone on the road to net zero future, but the road is long. We can, we must, and we will accelerate our collective efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Lastly, I would like to give the floor to the other representative speaking on behalf of environmental non-governmental organizations. I give the floor to a representative from Climate Action Network. You have 1 minute. You have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Aissatou Diouf, and I'm speaking on behalf of Climate Action Network. COP26 was supposed to be a crisis COP, a lifeline for the millions of people living in a permanent state of crisis, losing their lives, livelihoods, and homes as a result of climate impacts caused by rich polluting countries and corporations. We came to this COP with the hope that world leaders will respond to the needs of vulnerable people and communities. The science is clear. We are now in the era of climate impacts,
Loss and damage caused by climate change is happening already. Climate change is destroying lives and communities now. But yet, you political leaders failed to respond to their plight. We came to Glasgow with a litmus test for you. Provide finance on loss and damage, and you failed. We are disappointed by the betrayal of the rich nation and you, the COP presidency, for being complicit in blocking the proposal by the G77 and China on the creation of the Glasgow Loss and Damage Finance Facility. We are also disappointed with developing countries for not standing strong in the face of this pressure and acting in the interest of their citizens. Incremental progress is not good enough. What we need is concrete commitments to fight the climate emergency. This includes a rapid and equitable phase out, not phase down, all fossil fuels through a just energy transition and revision of national climate targets in line with 1.5 temperature goals. We, the Climate Action Network, a civil society network fighting the climate crisis for many decades, call this COP one of the most exclusionary COPs ever and betrayal of the people. We appreciate the commitment of the Secretariat to review and enhance the observer engagement in this process. We will continue fighting for climate justice. We will do this at home and at the African COP27. That COP, held in a climate vulnerable region, will have to be one that delivers for the vulnerable. People power, climate justice.
Thank you for your statement. We have now reached the end of our joint plenary meeting. This joint meeting is now adjourned.